I'd always been an early riser, convinced that the city's pre-dawn hush was the only time Central Park truly belonged to those who noticed its hidden corners. So there I was, headphones in, playlist on shuffle, toes tapping the chipped pavement of the pedestrian loop. The air still held a hint of last night's rain, cool, clean, and pregnant with possibility. At around 6:14 a.m., just past the Bethesda fountain, I spotted something odd, a cluster of pigeons circling in tight formation above the treetops. Their usual scatter was replaced by an almost ritualistic dance. Curiosity nudged me off the path. I skirted the fountain's balustrade, craning my neck to watch. A soft hum drifted down from the canopy, like a distant tuning fork. Goosebumps prickled my arms. Then came the light. Not street lamp glare or morning sun, but a pinpoint of pure white radiance that pulsed once, and then twice. Before I could scream, it expanded into a column that felt paradoxically gentle and irresistible. My feet lifted off the ground as if the park had suddenly become weightless, and in one fluid motion I was drawn upward, through branches and sky, leaving only that echoing hum behind. When the light dimmed, I was no longer in the park. Instead, I stood inside a transparent enclosure, a clear dome large enough to walk around but too confining to escape. The floor beneath me was a plush carpet of moss-like tufts, velvety green and unexpectedly springy. Ambient luminescence glowed from beneath, casting soft emerald shadows on the curved walls. Heart thudding, I pounded on the dome. Nothing happened, except a muted echo of my own panic. Frantically, I spun in place, searching for a door or panel, any sign of how to get out. That's when I noticed her. Perched like a poised statue just outside the dome was a figure no taller than 3 feet. She tilted her head, her lavender skin practically shimmering in the alien light. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a halo of translucent filaments, each strand glowing faintly at the tip. But it was her eyes that stole my breath. 2 enormous golden orbs, rimmed in violet, widening with delighted surprise as they locked onto me. She made a sound. It wasn't quite a laugh, but more like a series of high-pitched clicks strung together in cheerful rhythm. She raised a slender hand and tapped twice on the dome. I stumbled forward, pressing my palm against the cool surface, and she echoed the gesture on her side. The dome rippled like the surface of a pond, and then, impossibly, allowed her hand to pass through while still keeping me confined. It was a science fiction nightmare made real. "Pet," she declared, her voice sweet and clear in my mind, as if she'd spoken directly into my thoughts. I blinked. Had I thought that word out loud? I shook my head, trying to clear the haze clouding my senses. "Hi," I managed, voice hoarse. I'm not a pet." Her golden eyes flickered uncertainly, and then she tilted her head, mimicking my words. "Not pet?" she asked, voice curious and melodic. She tapped once more on the dome, and the panel nearest me slid open with a hiss. Before I could fully register what was happening, she reached in, scooped me up like a precious statuette, and set me gently on a cushion of floaty moss that hovered midair in the center of the chamber. My legs dangled over the edge, my heart raced so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "Pet," she said again, more softly this time, as if tasting the word on her tongue. She patted the cushion beside me. I swallowed. "I'm 15 feet tall," I said, trying to inject some logic into the surreal moment. "At least?" She cocked her head to one side, golden eyes widening in what I interpreted as delight. Then she reached out and brushed a fingertip against my knee. The touch sent a strange tingle up my spine. She giggled, a musical, bubbly sound, and clapped her hands. Immediately, soft lights flickered on around the dome's perimeter. Holographic panels floated into view, displaying star maps, what looked like anatomical diagrams of creatures I didn't recognize, and strings of symbols that twisted and turned like living vines. Gears and contraptions hummed to life along the ceiling. The entire ship seemed to awaken at her joyful exclamation. I tried to stand, but the moss cushion seemed oddly magnetic, My feet wouldn't budge. Frustration flared, but before I could voice another protest, she waved her hand. The dome retracted, and I tumbled, rather ungracefully, onto the bouncing carpet below. "Oh, sorry," she cooed, extending a hand to help me up. Her grip was surprisingly firm, like polished crystal. She drew me close and studied me with those huge golden eyes again. Behind her, the ship's corridors branched off, in every direction, lit by the same bioluminescent tones that filled the chamber. "I am Lila," she said, her voice echoing softly against the walls. "You are mine." I blinked, trying to sort out my racing thoughts. "Yours?" I croaked. "What? Where am I?" She pointed at one of the holographic star maps, then tapped a glittering dot in a cluster of constellations I couldn't place. Another tap, and a line drew itself from that dot down to a small, pale blue orb, Earth, unmistakable from countless photographs. "Earth," I said, relief and dread warring inside me. "And you brought me here." She beamed, emitting that melodic laughter of hers. "My pet," she repeated triumphantly, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. I looked around, searching for any hint of leverage or escape route. But Lila was already skipping toward a corridor, her feet barely making a sound on the glowing floor. Before I could process any more, she spun back, hands on her hips in a triumphant pose. "Come," she commanded, and patted the air beside her again, as though coaxing a small animal to follow. Swallowing my fear, I straightened my shoulders. "Okay," I said, voice steadier than I felt, "but we need to talk about why I'm not in fact a pet." Lila clicked her teeth in delight, grabbed my hand, and together we walked deeper into the ship. Two very different beings bound by curiosity, confusion, and the strange promise of an unexpected adventure. I woke to the soft glow of bioluminescent pods lining the walls of what Lila called her wellness pavilion, a cavernous room filled with the hum of unseen machinery and the scent of something sweetly alien. My head felt as light as one of those floating moss pods I'd been plucked into yesterday. Blinking twice, I realized I was suspended in a shallow cradle of what looked like spun sugar, drifting a few feet off the floor. Lila was perched at the far end, admiring me like a proud parent. She bounced on her toes, which astonishingly made no sound, clapped her hands, and let out a trill of excitement. "Morning, pet," she sang in that melodic lilt that still unnerved me. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the cradle. My feet brushed soft petals of violet and teal fibers woven into the cushion. "Morning," I replied cautiously, rubbing my temples. "What's today's plan?" Lila popped up and gestured at a series of vats filled with glowing goop. Each vat was rimmed in polished chrome, tubes snaking between them like veins. "Clean," she announced, tilting her head as though expecting praise for her clarity. "Clean?" I echoed. My stomach churned at the idea of more spa treatments. I'd barely recovered from the goo bath and zero-impact treadmill from yesterday. But before I could protest, she scooped me up and carried me to the nearest vat. The goo was warm and luminescent, swirling between pale pink and mint green. "This is for fur maintenance," Lila explained in clipped, thoughtful English. "Keeps coat shiny, prevents dryness." I snapped a mental reminder. No fur. "I don't have fur," I said, but Lila had already set me down and gently lowered me into the vat. The ooze swallowed me up to my chest, its texture like honey crossed with whipped cream. It smelled faintly of lavender and chocolate, a strangely comforting aroma. My skin tingled as the goo slid across every inch of me. "This feels nice," I admitted, surprised at how relaxed I already felt. My muscles, still stiff from my reckless tumble the day before, began to loosen. Lila's hands appeared above, the surface gently patting at my shoulders through the semi-solid gel. "I guess, thanks." Her golden eyes lit up. "Pet happy," she cooed, and buzzed a handheld device that hummed as it sprayed tiny droplets of cooling mist over my head. Eventually, I emerged, dripping with goo that evaporated into motes of light as it fell. Lila handed me a towel woven from silken moss threads, astonishingly absorbent, and I dried myself as best I could. My skin felt softer than it had in years. Next, she led me to the running stream, Lila's name for the transparent track hovering above the pavilion floor. I didn't question it. After all, normal gym equipment made 0 sense in a floating spa. The track was wide enough for 2, but she insisted I try it solo. I stepped up onto the platform and she slid a slim, metallic anklet onto each of my legs. They clicked into place with a satisfying snap. "Safety," she said, tapping her temple. "No fall." I nodded. She activated the tread with a push of her fingertip and the track began to hum. I took a tentative step and found myself jogging on air. The platform glowed beneath my footsteps, sending ripples of turquoise light shooting out in concentric circles. With each stride, I felt weightless. My lungs drew in as if for the first time. I jogged faster. The track accelerated. My heart pounded, not from exertion, but from pure exhilaration. My feet made no sound. The only echo was the soft thrum of the mechanism. Around me, holographic screens lined the walls. Constellations drifted by. Data streams scrolled in indecipherable symbols, and a gentle breeze seemed to blow through the pavilion despite the absence of windows. After what felt like both 5 minutes and 5 hours, Lila tapped the control beside the track. The platform decelerated, then stopped. I stumbled off, breathless and grinning. "Fun?" she asked, hovering beside me. "Yeah," I panted. "Better than any treadmill at my gym." She beamed and clapped again, conjuring 2 floating cubes made of translucent material. They glowed faintly. Inside, layered spheres of pastel fruit hovered in stasis. "Snack," she declared, lifting 1 cube to me. I hesitated, then bit into it. The flesh was cool and supple, bursting with juice that tasted like peach vanilla and something I couldn't name but instantly loved. It left a sparkle on my tongue. "Delicious," I said, handing the cube back. Lila tucked into hers, crunching the fruit with a decisively human bite. She spoke around her mouthful. "Pet must eat. Grow strong." I laughed. I didn't know pets needed to grow strong. She flicked a lock of glowing filament that passed for her hair. Not pet. Friend. Pet friend. For a moment, the absurdity of my situation hit me. I was calmly discussing nutrition with a 3-foot-tall alien girl who thought I was her adorable pet. But as I looked at her wide-eyed grin, genuine and unguarded, my irritation softened. There was something disarmingly earnest about Lila's affection. The rest of the morning blurred into a parade of odd treatments. A zero-gravity facial that felt like floating through a cloud of warm mist. A foot massage delivered by mechanical tendrils that gently kneaded the soles of my feet, and a gentle vibration pod that hummed at a frequency designed to realign one's cellular structure. With each procedure, I felt my tension dissolve, replaced by a strange sort of contentment. By midday, I found myself drifting toward a plush chaise beside Lila's favorite viewing window, an iris-shaped portal that framed the sapphire blue marble of Earth. We sat in companionable silence, sipping what passed for coffee, a frothy neon green brew that gurgled with tiny sparkles. It tasted like caramelized almonds and warm milk. I turned to Lila. "This isn't so bad," I admitted, "but I'd really like to figure out how to get home." Her expression flickered, an echo of worry, I thought. She set down her mug and reached out to touch mine. "Home," she repeated softly. "Earth is home?" "Yeah," I said, "but I belong there, out on the streets, with my life waiting. I can't stay here forever." Lila's shoulders drooped slightly. She clicked her teeth, a sound that oddly conveyed sadness. Then, after a heartbeat, she bounced back upright. "Home soon," she promised, pointing at her wrist where a swirling holographic display appeared. Symbols scrolled too fast for me to read, but a tiny blue dot pulsed at the center. "Maybe," I said, leaning back, "but I'm not your pet." Her golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Without warning, she scooped me into her arms, held me tight, and whispered, "My pet friend." I sighed, surrendering to the moment. At least I was a well-cared-for captive. And as bizarre as it sounded, I found I didn't entirely hate being Lila's pet. Not yet, anyway. Sleep came in short bursts aboard Lila's ship, the hum of its engines lulling me into restless dreams of blinking consoles and floating corridors. By the time I awoke, the pale blue glow of Earth's oceans drifted past the viewing port like a promise. Today I would escape. I slipped off the moss cushion before Lila stirred, my feet landing lightly on the soft crystalline floor. The corridors branched like the veins of a leaf, walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins. I'd memorized the route yesterday, left at the holomap, down 3 segments, then through the service hatch Lila never used. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crept past doors that shimmered shut at a touch, past sleeping pods that looked as cozy as coffins. At last I reached the panel beside the bulkhead. My fingers trembled as I tapped the hidden latch. The panel popped open with a hiss, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with cables and dim warning lights. Freedom lay at the other end, the airlock that opened into the vacuum above Central Park. I pressed forward into the crawl space, knees scraping against cool metal, every beep of the ship's life support a countdown to discovery. A small vent cover blocked my way. I slipped a finger through the narrow gap and flipped it away, grateful I'd watched Lila work on a similar panel. The tunnel sloped downward, and the air grew thin, but I pushed on, forcing myself to breathe through clenched teeth. Then, halfway through the tunnel, a soft chime echoed behind me. One of the ship's sensors had detected movement. I froze. The hum around me stuttered as a soft blue light washed the walls, Lila's tracking pulse. My stomach clenched. Retreat wasn't an option. I had to finish this. I spotted the airlock door at the tunnel's end. A thick circular portal marked with the universal symbol for egress. My hand hovered over the release lever. I took a breath and yanked it down, only to feel a gentle but unyielding force halt my tug. "Friend?" A tiny voice echoed from behind. My heart sank. Lila glided into view, her golden eyes wide with concern. In her hand she held the same tool I'd used to open the panel. "You go?" she asked softly, stepping closer. Her lavender skin glowed in the tunnel's dim light. "Pet friend go?" I swallowed guilt like bitter medicine. I need to get back, Lila. You're kind, but this isn't my world." Her lower lip quivered in the most human expression I'd seen on her face. She set the tool down and moved so close I could see the delicate veins beneath her skin. "Stay?" My throat tightened. Part of me longed to stay. Another day of zero-gravity jogs, goo baths, and neon coffee seemed heaven compared to my rent, my job, my deadlines. But another part knew I belonged on Earth, among the messy rhythms of humanity. "I have to," I whispered. Lila nodded once, dignity intact. She turned and tapped the airlock's control panel. The circular door slid open, revealing the endless black of space studded with brilliant stars, and, beyond them, the fragile blue curve of Earth. Before I could step forward, she reached out, brushing my hand. "Visit?" I gave a small, sad smile. "Always." She produced a tiny device, a tagging beacon perhaps, and pressed it to my wrist. It molded around me like a bracelet of living crystal. "Pet friend locator," she explained. Flexed my wrist. The device glowed softly, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Lila stepped back and I felt a final surge of sorrow and gratitude. "Goodbye, Lila." I stepped through the airlock and felt the rush of cold space slip around me as I drifted toward the portal to Earth. "Goodbye, pet friend." Lila's voice echoed through the hatch, warm and hopeful. Then the door sealed, and I was free, scarred by love, armed with promise, and tethered forever by a beacon pulsing against my skin. The first time I used the portal after I got back to Earth, it felt like stepping through a dream. One moment I was dodging early morning commuters at Grand Central. The next, I was drifting through Lila's ship, the air heavy with the scent of alien blooms and humming softly under my feet. In my hand was an ordinary stainless steel travel mug, filled with New York's finest dark roast, no sugar, no cream, the proud emblem of my own world. Lila met me in the atrium, her golden eyes lighting up brighter than any bioluminescent lamp. She was cradling 2 cups of what she called serikali, a frothy neon green brew that sparkled with tiny motes of light. When she saw my travel mug, she tilted her head in curious delight. "Earth coffee?" she asked, voice a melodic trill. I handed her the mug. "Try it," I said. "It's the best I could brew at home." She dipped a glowing fingertip into the black liquid and licked it, her eyes widening. "Strong," she declared, then sipped from the tiny cup she'd offered me. "Sweet?" she ventured. I grinned. "Sometimes," I shrugged. We settled on a cushioned bench by the great viewing port, an iris-shaped window framing the vast expanse of space. Beyond it, Earth spun in silent majesty, clouds drifting like paint on a canvas of deep blue. Lila set her cup on a moss pod table and produced a small platter of cold pastries, cranberry muffins, croissants, and something I recognized as a cinnamon bun. She inspected each delicately, then took a tentative bite of the croissant, her filaments quivering with delight. I drank in the moment, the gentle hiss of the ship's life support, the soft glow around us, and the honest joy on her lavender face. "Tell me about your world," I said, swirling my coffee. Her lips curved into that wide, toothy smile I'd grown to love. "Cirrus 7, she began, leaning forward as though sharing a secret. "My home. Islands float in sky. Whales of crystal swim through the air currents. At night the forest trees glow, each a different color singing the wind's song." She closed her eyes as if recalling the memory. Music of light. I imagined it, airborne crystal whales trailing shimmering wakes, trees alive with color and song. "That sounds magical." I found myself sipping Lila's serikali again, the flavor a complex dance of caramel and stardust. She laughed, those clicking musical notes that never failed to thrill me. "Your coffee is now bold," she said. "Good for long talks." Nodded. "Then let's talk." I set down my cup and pointed at the stars beyond the port. Out there is a nebula called the Pillar of Creation. It's where stars are born, giant columns of gas and dust. Thousands of light years from here, but each one could host a planet, a life. Lila's eyes shone with wonder. "Life, like you and me." I smiled. "Yes, maybe even pets like me. Except, well, not pets." I tapped my wrist where her locator beacon nestled. "Thanks to you, I can visit any time. I think that makes me more than a pet." She cocked her head, considering. Then she reached out and took my hand. "Pet friend," she agreed softly. For the next few hours, though it felt like moments, we traded stories. I told her about sunrise runs through Central Park, the roar of subway tunnels, the taste of dollar slice pizza. She described Cirrus 7's sky gardens, the dance of its twin moons, the delicate art of weaving light into clothing. Every so often, she would pause our chatter to point out a distant star or constellation on the ship's holomap. Her slender, finger-tracing lines I could barely follow. When serikali turned lukewarm, I offered her more of my coffee, now cooled to just warm perfection. She laughed, sipping it straight, unperturbed by the heat. Then she produced a holographic deck of cards, each card a living snapshot of alien wildlife. We played a game she called Sky Hunt, tossing cards into the air and trying to catch the creatures within. I ended up with a floating jellyfish beetle. She caught a pair of crystal-winged foxes. We compared which was cuter. By the time I stepped back through the portal to Earth, my mind felt as expansive as the cosmos. My commute home was a blur of taxi horns and neon signs, but I carried with me a profound sense of connection to Lila, to her strange and beautiful world, and to the stars above. That night, as I lay in my own bed, I traced the faint pulse of the beacon on my wrist. It throbbed with a soft blue glow, a reminder that friendship and adventure awaited me whenever I dared to step through the portal again. The morning sky over Central Park gleamed pale and cool when I stepped through Lila's portal, for what I told myself would be the last time, at least for a while. My feet touched the dew-damp grass, and the city's familiar soundtrack rushed. In distant sirens, morning joggers' laughter, a subway rumbling underground. My heart fluttered with relief and nostalgia all at once. Behind me, the portal shimmered closed, and I turned to find Lila standing just inside the ship's entrance. She wore her brightest smile, but behind it danced a cautious hope. In her handheld palm glowed the tiny, crystalline bracelet she'd given me at my first escape attempt, the locator beacon now pulsing a steady, gentle blue. "Today," I said softly, meeting her golden eyes. "I have things to do on Earth, but thank you, Lila, for everything." She tilted her head and tapped her wrist, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's timeline, the coffee shop where we first swapped brews, the spot in Central Park where I first vanished. With a slender finger, she traced each memory back to my own world. "Visit?" she asked, her voice a hopeful trill. I reached out, brushing her hand. "Always," I promised. "But on my terms, okay? I'll text you before I come." I smiled, imagining the bewilderment and delight on her lavender face when she saw a message floating in midair. "Landing in 5. Lila clapped her hands, making the ship's corridor lights dance like tiny stars. "Pet friend protocols," she declared, tapping out a sequence on her ship's console. The air hummed, and a second, subtler hologram appeared around my wrist. A schedule interface with Earth's days and hours. She tapped a slot marked weekends and gave me a triumphant nod. I laughed, realizing she'd already set up a visitation schedule. "That works," I said, kissed her delicate cheek and stepped back. She waved, her filaments aglow. "Be safe," she chirped. I nodded once more and crossed the threshold. The portal swallowed me in a cascade of moonlight white pixels and spat me out onto the jog path by Bethesda Fountain. The city's bustle bit into my senses, horns, chatter, the tang of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor. But I felt lighter than I'd ever known. That afternoon, I met my rough and ready friends at the coffee shop for a late latte. When I slipped off my jacket, they all noticed the iridescent bracelet on my wrist. I shrugged, took a sip of my flat white, and winked. "Long story," I said, "but I'll tell you all about it next weekend." And as the sun sank behind the skyline, I felt the gentle pulse at my wrist, that tiny beacon of promise and friendship bridging two worlds. I was free and tethered, in the perfect balance, forever her pet friend, and eternally grateful for an adventure that began with a beam of light and a 3-foot alien girl who refused to let me go.